Americans as a driver and fixing their cars. So he sponsored them, and that young couple came over, and that young couple apparently stayed in South Dakota for a couple of years, and then when this man's daughter got married, he needed to employ his son-in-law. So my aunt and uncle moved to Chicago. And we are an example of what we in genealogy call chain migration. That couple sponsored my next aunt and uncle and their children, and my next aunt and uncle sponsored my mother and my sister and myself. So when we came in 1956, by then we'd had several family members here already. That's sort of my story.
My name's Scott Gillis, and I came to visit Beulah, Wyoming, actually, in 2003 for the first time. I had been living down south in Guatemala, in this little town in the mountains, for a couple of years, and so I met a friend of mine who lived in Beulah, and he just kind of asked if I ever had any interest in coming to visit Wyoming. And so, kind of like Petra, I had to looked on the globe at the place I worked, and I thought, oh, it's under Saskatchewan. I thought, oh, that'd be all right. Sure. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, by the way. And so the first person I met after flying into Denver and taking a bus over here to the Minuteman and getting picked up and driven back to Beulah is now my wife, a beautiful young lady named Michelle Moore at the time. And she, you know, for the first few years I was here, I kind of went back and forth to Canada a little bit, always trying to get Shell to move up there, but she wasn't budging. She liked Beulah too much. She found Beulah by accident too. She was on her way traveling to Alaska, and they stopped to camp on Sand Creek, and she just loved it so much that she stayed. So I ended up down here permanently, and we got married in '07, and been married for a few years, and that's my story. And I just love it around here so much. I mean, the hills are just so beautiful, and coming from a big city, I'd always wanted to live in a small place, and luckily I had a friend with a landscaping company, and you know, I ended up working for him for the first few years, and now I'm back in school at Black Hills to be a teacher, an English teacher here in a couple of years. So that's kind of my story.
And you are a Canadian citizen?
And I'm still a Canadian citizen, yeah. I haven't renounced my... So it was the choice, you know. I had to either renounce my Canadian citizenship, and I just thought, well, maybe I'm a permanent resident, so...
Just for those of you that don't know, I actually am also an immigrant. We moved to the United States when I was 4 years old, by somewhat of a roundabout way. My parents are British. I was born in Britain. My father at the time had to complete required military service, and he chose to do that in Canada. So when I was a year old, we moved to just outside of Ottawa, Ontario, and that's where all three of my sisters were born. So my sisters are all Canadian, or they were by birth. So they had Canadian citizenship, and then we moved down to the United States when I was 4. And that's where my brother was born, and he's American by birth. So within one family, we had 5 children that had 3 different types of citizenship, of which 3 of them actually had the citizenship from the country that we spent the least amount of time with and had no permanent roots at all, which is kind of an interesting reflection. I just realized this last year, part of thinking about the big read. My current immigration status is actually I'm a dual citizen. Britain allows you to retain your citizenship, and so I am both British and a naturalized American citizen. I did not become a naturalized American citizen until I was about 36 years old, and the reason I actually did that, it's an interesting, I think for many people here, they would tell you that it's interesting being an immigrant to a country where all your family roots are somewhere else. It may not be as easy to change citizenship sometimes as you think it might be. For Americans, they often, I think, find it difficult to understand why someone would not automatically become an American citizen. But for myself, it was because it actually my British citizenship at the time represented some opportunities for my family in terms of ease of movement to international countries. I can bring my family into a lot of countries that Peter could not easily, my husband who's a professor, could not easily bring families into without having to go through a rather elaborate process. But it was really after we lived in England for a year that I realized that the rest of the world saw me as an American. I had never really considered that the rest of the world saw me as American because I've been raised with very strong British roots and very strong British traditions, and parents that had accents and grew up with an accent until it was basically beaten out of me in middle school. And it wasn't until I realized that the rest of the world really saw me as an American that I realized that it was an important part of kind of who I am and how I represent myself to the world. And so I have kept my dual citizenship, but that's kind of how we came down here. We came down to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and my earliest memories of coming here were the fact that 2 weeks after we moved here, President Kennedy was shot, and I was 4, and my parents were thinking what had they done coming to a country that the president would be shot. And then the next thing I remember was the night that the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, because my father is from Liverpool. And so they set up the TV so that we could watch the Beatles coming to America. And I remember that very strongly. So, the next question we didn't talk about is those of you that immigrated as children, what do you remember about moving to a new country? And really the only one that really immigrated as a child was Ronnie. So I'm going to actually let her talk about, she has an interesting experience of moving here as a child and not knowing English. So, kind of talking about, did you know English? How did you acquire it? How did you feel different from other children? Why? What did you do to try to fit in?
When I came here at the age of 10, I spoke no English. My family was Polish, but my mother and my sisters and I lived in Germany after the war with my grandparents quite a few years, and I went to German schools. So I was fluent in German and Polish. When we moved to Chicago, we moved to the Polish part of Chicago, and I went to a grammar school that was run by Polish nuns. I was very lucky. I went back to the first grade at the age of 10. You can imagine the humiliation for 3 months. And then for 3 months I was in 3rd grade. And then for 3 months I was in 4th grade. But the nuns were very generous. And the principal there was extremely generous. She would take an hour every day of her time and teach me English through my Polish, because that was the way we could communicate. So within 4 years, I graduated with my own class out of 8th grade. By that time, my English, as you can tell, most people do not know I'm from another country because I have no accent. I have a Chicago accent. That's what I have. The hardest thing for me, my family was very old-fashioned. I had a very hard time as a teenager. I went to an all-girl Catholic school, but my friends wore makeup, they had boyfriends. My mother did not, I had a lot of conflict with my mother, did not allow me to wear makeup. I was not allowed to wear short skirts. I was not allowed to, we used to roll up our uniforms. I don't know if you all went to Catholic schools, but we all wore uniforms. And to get the skirt short from below the knee all the way down there,
you just
would
roll it up.
pull up your vest, and then you would roll up the waistband 2 or 3 times before you got on the city bus, because you couldn't possibly get on the city bus with the uniform skirt that long. He sounds like...
I did it a lot.
So, anyway, being a teenager was very difficult. The old ways were the ways that were dominant in the family, and not only in my family, but in my aunts' homes, food traditions. The one tradition we took up pretty quickly, though, was Thanksgiving. I think that, we were obviously Catholic, so we had a lot of Catholic traditions, but Thanksgiving was something that we took up very, very quickly. I think everybody enjoyed that. 4th of July was another holiday we all enjoyed very, very much. The big change came to my family, probably much like the story. I was the oldest of all of the grandkids, of all of the cousins. When I married at 19. I married a man who didn't speak anything but English. And so when he came for dinner, or when we came for dinner, I asked my family to no longer speak anything except English because it was rude. He wouldn't understand what they were saying. So from then I forced my family, everyone in the family, to start. They could speak English, not very well, but they had a form of broken English. But I demanded that they all speak English so that he could feel comfortable. And so that kind of changed, and from then on, everybody started to speak English in a much more prevailing fashion wherever we went.
Your story about fighting with your mom through junior high and high school. I was the oldest child of the British family, and even though I spoke English, my parents did not understand American high school relative to British high schools. In junior high, I can kind of totally relate to those same kind of experience. High school experience is so different, and American society was so different. So I can really relate to those kind of same fights that went on. For those of you who immigrated as adults, what have been the biggest adjustments for you in terms of moving to this country, and how have you kind of coped with them? What are the things that you've done to kind of adjust to America, but bring your own traditions and then acquire American traditions at the same time?
For me, at first was the language barrier too. I just knew, like, you guys go to high school or school and you learn Spanish. This is how I learned English. It was just, hi, how are you? Where's the train station? I knew these basics. But to have a really conversation, it was hard. So I had a husband who would draw on a piece of paper, and he would tell me that he did bike tours, so he would draw a bike and somebody riding on it, and this is how we get to know each other. And then I came to Hill City, and there was an older lady. She was a school teacher, and I would go see her a couple times a week for an hour, and she would give me some English lessons, and that really helped me. And so that was very helpful for me. And the adjustments, you mean with the holidays?
Well, holidays, traditions, I mean, even just, kind of how are things different in terms of how day-to-day life runs here versus...
Well, the Germans have lots of holidays. We have July 4th, we have Thanksgiving and Christmas. In Germany, we have Christmas is 2 days. It starts the 24th in the evening, then we celebrate the 25th and 26th. Then we have New Year's, then we have January 6th, the holiday. Then we have Easter, we have Easter Sunday and Easter Monday as a holiday. And then we have and then also school breaks. That's kind of hard for me to adjust since I have kids now who are starting school. We have a big summer break here, 3 months. And this is kind of all the break we get here. In Germany, it's all split up. We have 2 weeks end of May, then we have 6 weeks in the summer, then 2 weeks in the fall, and then we have Christmas break, another 2 weeks. So it's really spread out. Here it's like, boom, all in one time. So this was for me a big adjustment to the things that we built here. Yeah.
Edda, how about yourself?
Yes. I learn English every day in my life. Of course, during the high school and the university, we have English course. In high school, it's exactly like here in the United States. They have Spanish or other language, so we have the English. And in the university, we decide which language we want to learn. So the first time I decided for French, and after that I took 2 semesters of English. And I thought that it's enough to go another country. But when I arrived here, everything was different. And I was traveling, like I was working in some place maybe 3 months, and I don't need to speak too much. So it's like, okay, I need the English, but it's not wasn't so drastic for me. And when I realized that I would be living here when I get married here, so I came to the Hill State University to check what I can do, or I don't know, think about my future. And I transfer my documents to here to the United States, and also I start some courses. And I thought that with that would be helping to learn English, but it was a little hard because the courses wasn't a class to learn English as a second language, was a regular courses. I take classes like English, teaching English as a second language, or grammar English. So helped me, but really wasn't for my level of English. However, I continued, trying to learn and practicing, and so for now, it's what this is my level of English, and I know I have to learn a lot, but also I know there is a lot of people who have a lot of patience, and they understand, when you are learning another language, there is other people that they don't have too much patience because maybe they don't have experience with people from other cultures or also. We have, I can think that we don't have Thanksgiving in Honduras or in Latin America, but we have all the other celebrations, the Independence Day, and we do almost the same things. And Christmas is different than here because we celebrate Christmas all the December 24th and until midnight. And we continue the 25th also, and we open the present, and we do the same with New Year. So we start to celebrate in December 31st at noon until next day, January 1st. And there is other celebration also in January 6th, the continuation of Christmas. And of course there is a different holidays that we don't have, like Luther King, we don't have that, but we have other celebration. And I don't have too much to say about the difference in the educational system because I don't have experience with we don't have kids, so I don't know too much. But I know that the system here in the United States, I think, is easy to study because it's more relaxed, it's more investigation, so it's kind of you select your topic. And there in Honduras, specific in Honduras, the topic that professor, they give you what you have to do. And it's more, what I can say, more memoristic than here. So that is the big difference that I see in the educational system. And I am talking more about higher education level and K-12, I don't know too much. So.
Michelle, what have been the biggest adjustments for you, and how have you acquired American holidays and traditions and things like that, or national identity, like the namesake?
I think the very first one was when I arrived at the airport in Rapid City. It's just a tiny little airport at the time, and there was no public transportation. Then I realized that you just don't decide to go somewhere on the train or on the bus, so that was the first adjustment, that you needed a car very quickly. Wherever you go in South Dakota, you need a car. And then I learned that you just don't need a car, you need a car for the winter. Because we had about an inch of snow and it paralyzes the country. And we have some states that are getting used to that now, but that's what I was used to. So that was my very first big moment of, wow, this is really very remote. But then I worked on the reservation right away, which they don't have paved roads. So I had to learn how to drive on gumbo and mud and sometimes sleep at the school, and that did not make the news like other places. we did those things. Another adjustment was people don't like to be too close. The American people need their 3 feet, and I was told, excuse me, but I need my space. So I had to adjust not to be close to someone or not to kiss someone, because that's how we greet, and here we shake hands and hug. And my family had a hard time when my son forgot to kiss my mother, so my mother was crying. Some adjustments there, because the food, the love of food coloring, and everything needs all the colors, and the cakes have the worst colors possible. And I identified them as E4 and F5 because they are all chemicals that they put to make colors, and so I still don't have adjusted to the food coloring. That's one thing I did not adjust to. But holidays, a little story that happened to my students the very first time we had Halloween. I did not know what Halloween was. And they came with their little costumes and makeup and all of that. And there was a parade in the school, and I did not know anything about that. Nobody had prepared me. And my students were waiting and waiting. Can we go to the parade? Can we dress up? Can we? No, we have class. And, you know, so they did not have Halloween with me. And so the next day, once I found out all about Halloween, my students had their own parade and on Halloween the day after, and brought all the candy to the room. But I learned about Halloween that way. I did not know much about Halloween, but that was one of the finding the foods to prepare the way we are used to prepare food. Some of the vegetables that are not easy to find, or spices. It's now so much better than 20 years ago. We can go to a store in Spearfish and find the herbs or the spices and vegetables that did not exist at the time. So one of the holidays that I brought back is what you call Groundhog Day. For us, it's a National Light Day, and it's Crepes Day. And so we have a little tradition where we do crepes on February 2nd. And to make sure you have money for the rest of your year, you take one small crepe and you put a penny in it, and then you roll the penny, put it in a little cellophane paper, and then keep that crepe in your refrigerator for the whole year until the next year when you make a new one. And it's kind of helping you, you know, have enough money to live. I mean, not winning at the lottery, it's just a protection. It's an old tradition. I think that the education system is similar to Germany. We have the breaks every those 2 weeks, but we don't have 3 months vacation. And as a teacher, what surprised me the most, well, first, the metric system doesn't exist. And my first day at the lumberyard, I was only in faith a week, and I needed a board to be able to hang something on the window. And I went to the lumberyard and I said, I'd like to have 2 meters of this wood. And he looked at me and says, ma'am, you're in America, here is a yardstick. You come back when you can. So I had to adjust. And then I taught all my 5th graders how to divide using a different way, because I did not know there was something called the U.S. standard computation. And so all my 5th graders learned something different. They just learned to go from left to right, like they read, instead of right to left, like they do here. And nobody had issues with that, but it was one adjustment I had to make. Proximity.
Scott, from Canada.
Oh, well, obviously everyone knows there are certain pronunciation differences in certain words. And by the way, Canadians don't say a boot, they say about. So I've had to work on my out, and just stub your toe like out. And you know, I picked up you betcha right away when I got here, because I think the first day we stopped into the global market on our way back to Beulah and then to the Safeway, and I think about 5 people said you bet or you betcha to me, and I thought, well, then I'm going to pick that up. So I fit in, you know. And you know, my adjustment was kind of having grown up in a city, in a big city, and you know, living in a couple different cities. I lived in Vancouver for a couple of years. You know, it was an urban to a rural kind of adjustment as well. And I had never owned a car. I moved here when I was 30, but like, you know, I had lots of public transportation always, and but realized pretty quickly if we were going to remain in Beulah that I needed a car. So I got my first car at the age of 30. There was I had recycled pretty much all my life, and there's no recycling here, so that was a bit different. You know, I mean, there aren't huge differences, really. You know, different attitudes that people have towards, you know, towards each other, and I think towards, you know, towards the government and stuff. It's just, they're just different attitudes here as opposed to in Canada. And then, of course, you know, my first couple experiences with having to go to the doctor was different as well. You know, I'd never gotten a doctor bill before, so that was
I was shocked.
Yeah, I had heat stroke. I was getting an IV over at the Queen City Medical because I was so dehydrated. And I thought, and they had me sitting in this nice comfortable chair, everything was just going really well, and I think I was on my second bag of saline, getting rehydrated. And then this woman came in, and she wasn't a nurse, but she was this very polite and happy and bubbly young lady, and I thought, geez, maybe she's just here to check on me or something. But she was there to figure out how I was going to pay for it. And I just, my friend luckily helped me out with that. So, the first time I was in public and everyone stood up and said the Pledge of Allegiance, that was a little different for me. Obviously we have a national anthem in Canada and stuff, but I was at my friend's daughter's high school graduation in Sundance, and I guess I was a little bit unprepared, but when everyone stood up and put their hand on their hearts and said the pledge, I was just kind of like, I just followed along and kind of mouthed stuff. But that was a little different, but some of the things I did to fit in is I worked on my pronunciation, first of all. And then, I got into football. My wife is a really big football fan. And hockey being the national, it's actually not the national sport. Lacrosse is the national sport in Canada, but everyone thinks it's hockey. And, having embraced, she's a big Buffalo Bills fan, she being from back east. So I became a football fan, and that's how we spend our Sundays, right up until, last weekend, I guess. So now we're lost for a few months until August again. But so I felt that really did. I wear my Bills hat around, and I thought that really did make me, help me to fit in a little bit better. I don't know, just have something to talk about, I guess. And, but otherwise, it's a pretty easy transition, I think, from Canada to the States. Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the discussion about cars and transportation, especially in this part of the United States, because many people come from countries where a lot of public transportation is readily available, and in fact, oftentimes it's extremely expensive to have a car.
Oh, when you have a driver's license, like in Germany, a driver's license, you have to go test. You have to do a 2-week sitting test where you do all the riding, and then you have to do a write-in test after you did all these classes. I think it's 20 hours. Then you have to do 20-hour driving, take 20 hours driving lessons, and then you have to do a test. And it's like $2,000 to $3,000 to do it. Here it's $60. You go in, you do a couple of classes, and you're done. Like, wow, I should have done my driving test here, because I came over when I was 18, and I made my driving test over there, and then came right away over. I should have saved my money. But
my mother didn't know how to drive when we came to the United States. She didn't drive.
But then driving over there in Germany, you have to be more aware there's more traffic. Driving here, I always say you can shell peanuts while you drive down the interstate. Because it's like the interstates in Wyoming are so empty that you have, it's just cruise control, we don't have that over there. You don't want to put it on because you're always watching.
And my mother learned to drive 3 or 4 years after we moved here, and her first driving trip, she decided with all of us, with the 5 kids, would be just to drive across South Dakota. And, they just didn't need to learn how to drive. My father happened to drive, but my mother didn't. And it's interesting for kids from here in the United States, or at least especially from here in Spearfish, those that go overseas, when they find out in other countries that people aren't allowed to drive often until they're 18 and 19 years old, and these kids have been driving since they're 14. And that's one of the things that I think people are always shocked at, is especially for these small states like in South Dakota, where we're so remote, the children are put behind the car behind the wheel relatively early.
Well, I have a slightly different story. I raised my daughter in Southern California, which is car country, USA, and she had a car from the time she was 16. When she went off to MIT at 17, the first weekend she was there, she called me, and she's hysterical on the phone. She's just got there. She's on the phone. She's crying. You didn't teach me how to ride the subway. She did not know how to get on the T, which is the Boston transportation system, and she was hysterical. And I said to her, hang out with some other kids, go with them, follow them, they'll show you how to do it. And so that night she called back, and that's exactly what she did. She found some kids, and they showed her how to put the token in and push this thing, and how to buy a ticket. But I mean, she'd been an American kid raised in Southern California. She had never seen a subway. So it's just, it depends on which part of the country you grow up in.
Right. For those of you that have acquired U.S. citizenship, can you kind of describe how you went through that decision? And then, because in many cases, some of you have to give up your other citizenship, and kind of Was that difficult? What was the experience like? Did you feel conflicted at all? And if you do you think Americans understand that feeling?
There are only two of
Are
us.
there only two?
I don't think anybody get them.
You two are naturalized.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. Why don't you talk about that experience?
The first, I never thought that I would be a citizen in the United States because it's, I think that I cannot have two mothers, just one. So I think I cannot have two countries, just one. And when I start to think, oh, I want to vote, I have my own ideas. And so I talked with my husband and I said, I want to vote for this and this and this reason. I live here and all of that. So he said, okay, whatever you want to do, it's no problem, just let's go to check what you have to do. And we did. And the first was a lot of emotion. And like, oh, I will be like a big test in my life. And it's like, oh, I will be taking something very important, a big value. And I did a test and everything very good, excellent. But in the moment, in the ceremony, it's like, I don't want that. It is, oh my God, I can't do this. I was so excited, but I was sad at the same time. I don't know what is my feelings in that moment. Even that I have both nationalities. I am Honduran in Honduras, and I am American here. That moment is something that I can't describe my emotions. I was happy, but at the same time sad, because it's like, oh, I can have two things at the same time. I can't, it's just one. But now, it starts to be normal. Then yes, I am a citizen here.
I took my citizenship when I was 18. I was starting university at University of Illinois. My parents did not have citizenship at that time. Neither of them had the language skills yet to get to that level. I think with me, it wasn't particularly traumatic. I think at that time, I'm trying to think back on it, I just decided I belonged, and I wanted to belong, and this was during the 60s on the college campuses. And so I think I was politically motivated to become involved. I think the FBI does have a file for me somewhere up there. But for me, there was no elaborate ceremony. I went down to the courthouse in downtown Chicago and took the test, and had the examiner ask me who was the mayor of Chicago, and I knew the answer.